In the summer of 2019, I felt a strong urge to escape the city and immerse myself in nature. After some research, I found a remote cabin in the woods that seemed perfect for a solitary retreat. The online photos showed a quaint, rustic cabin surrounded by dense forest and a tranquil lake. It seemed like the perfect place to unwind and recharge. I arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon, greeted by the sound of birds chirping and the gentle rustling of leaves. The air was crisp and fresh, a welcome change from the city's pollution. Inside, the cabin was cozy, with a fireplace, a small kitchen, and a single bedroom. I spent the first 2 days hiking through the forest, fishing in the lake, and reading by the fireplace. It was idyllic. On the third night as I lay in bed, I was suddenly jolted awake by a loud banging noise coming from the front door. My heart pounded as I sat up, straining to listen. The banging continued, steady and insistent. I mustered the courage to go downstairs, grabbing a flashlight on my way. When I reached the door and opened it, there was nothing, just the dark, empty woods. Confused and a bit shaken, I convinced myself it was likely a wild animal and went back to bed. The next night, I was again awakened by the same banging sound. Only this time it was louder and more persistent. I repeated my routine from the previous night, opening the door to find nothing but silence and darkness. As I turned to close the door, a sudden cold breeze blew past me, accompanied by a faint whisper, "Leave now." I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I quickly shut the door and locked it, my mind racing with fear and confusion. On the fifth night, the atmosphere in the cabin felt different. The air was heavy, and an unshakable sense of dread filled me. I was sitting by the fireplace when the temperature in the room suddenly plummeted. The fire, which had been burning brightly, extinguished itself, leaving me in complete darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, and when I turned it on, the beam flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As I swept the flashlight across the room, I saw shadowy figures moving, barely perceptible, but undeniably there. Terrified, I backed into a corner, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The shadows grew more defined, and I realized they were ghostly apparitions, pale, translucent figures with hollow eyes and twisted faces. They circled me, their movements slow and deliberate. I could hear them whispering in a language I couldn't understand, their voices low and menacing. One of the figures, more distinct than the others, approached me, its eyes locked onto mine, and it spoke in a chilling, hollow voice. "You shouldn't have come here." The shadows closed in, and I felt an icy coldness enveloping me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I fought to remain calm. Summoning every ounce of courage, I bolted from the cabin, not daring to look back. I ran to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, I managed to start the car and sped away, the cabin receding into the darkness behind me. I didn't stop driving until I reached the safety of a nearby town. There, I checked into a hotel, still trembling from the encounter. The next day, I contacted the owner of the cabin to inform them of my decision to leave early. I didn't mention the ghostly figures, fearing they would think I was crazy. Since that night, I have been plagued by nightmares, the whispers and cold breath of the apparitions haunting me in my sleep. I have vowed never to return to that cursed cabin, but the memory of those chilling nights remains vivid, a constant reminder of the terror I experienced. In the fall of 2020, I developed a fascination with urban exploration, drawn by the allure of abandoned places and their untold stories. One evening, a friend mentioned an old abandoned asylum on the outskirts of our town. It had a dark history and was rumored to be haunted, making it a perfect destination for my next adventure. Excited and a bit apprehensive, I decided to explore it the following evening. As the sun set, I made my way to the asylum. The building loomed ominously against the darkening sky, its broken windows and crumbling facade casting eerie shadows. Vines had overtaken much of the structure, giving it a foreboding and desolate appearance. I parked my car at a distance and approached the building, my flashlight cutting through the growing darkness. The moment I stepped inside, an overwhelming sense of unease washed over me. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, and the walls were covered in graffiti. Broken furniture and scattered debris littered the floor, adding to the feeling of desolation. I began my exploration, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. As I moved deeper into the building, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. My breath fogged up and I could see my own shivers. It was then that I heard the faintest of whispers, barely audible but unmistakable. I turned around, my flashlight revealing nothing but the decaying interior. Brushing it off as the wind, I continued my exploration, albeit with heightened caution. I entered one of the patient rooms, curious to see what remnants of the past I might find. The room was small, with a rusted bed frame and an old tattered mattress. As I scanned the room, my flashlight caught movement in the corner. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the ghostly figure of a woman in a white hospital gown. Her eyes were hollow, and she exuded an aura of despair. She reached out towards me, her mouth moving as if trying to speak. Paralyzed with fear, I couldn't move or look away. The apparition slowly faded, but the whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls. I heard cries and screams, the anguished voices of the asylum's past inhabitants. Panic set in, and I decided it was time to leave. As I hurried down the corridor, I felt a sudden tug on my jacket. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting frantically, but saw nothing. I finally reached the exit, but as I stepped outside, the heavy door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. My nerves were shot, and I ran to my car, my pulse racing. As I drove away, the asylum's dark silhouette loomed in my rearview mirror. The experience left me shaken to my core, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Later, I learned more about the asylum's tragic history. It had been the site of numerous patient abuses, with many people subjected to inhumane treatments and experiments. Many had died within its walls, and it was believed that their tormented souls remained trapped there, unable to find peace. Since that night, I have been haunted by the memories of the asylum. The ghostly woman and the anguished voices still echo in my mind. My curiosity for urban exploration has waned, replaced by a lingering fear of what other dark secrets lie hidden in abandoned places. In the winter of 2021, I inherited an old manor house from a distant relative. The house was a beautiful yet eerie structure with grand architecture that had seen better days. Despite its charm, the manor had a reputation for being haunted, with locals sharing stories of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Skeptical but curious, I decided to move in and see for myself. The first few nights in the manor were uneventful. I spent my time exploring the vast rooms, admiring the antique furniture and old portraits that lined the walls. However, on the fourth night, I was awakened by the sound of furniture moving downstairs. Groggy and disoriented, I got up to investigate. In the living room, I found the chairs and tables rearranged in a chaotic manner. There was no sign of forced entry, and I couldn't explain how the heavy furniture had moved on its own. I set everything back in place, unsettled but determined to stay. The following day, I discovered the kitchen in disarray. Plates were shattered on the floor, and the cabinets were wide open. I felt a growing sense of unease, but I tried to rationalize the events. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard whispers and footsteps coming from the attic. Summoning my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs. The attic door was slightly ajar, and a cold draft hit me as I opened it further. Inside, the temperature dropped dramatically, and I saw an old rocking chair moving back and forth on its own. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the corner of the attic, a shadowy figure began to materialize. It had glowing red eyes and an aura of malevolence that sent chills down my spine. The figure lunged at me and I stumbled back, terrified. I ran downstairs, but the entity followed, causing objects to fly off the shelves and lights to flicker wildly. In a desperate attempt to escape, I grabbed my car keys and fled the house. As I drove away, I looked back to see the figure standing in the doorway, watching me with its piercing red eyes. I never returned to the manor and eventually sold it. The new owners reported similar experiences and soon moved out as well. The house remains vacant to this day, a testament to the malevolent spirit that resides within its walls. Even now, the memory of that night haunts me, and I can still feel the cold grip of fear whenever I think about it.